Tom Cruise is a passionate man, especially passionate when it comes to his own family. He's determined his adopted kids, Isabella and Connor, will have as normal an upbringing as possible.
Your family life was difficult. You're estranged from your father and your mum and dad were divorced. Has that had an impact on you as a dad, how you bring up your children?
Your children?
I'm hoping to.
Okay, good.
I hope I can.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've got a great mother and a very close family, and it's something that I always wanted to be a father. And I think that one of the great things that we've done with our children is allowing them to be themselves.
Is that hard to give them a perspective that they are like the kids down the road, even though their parents are who you are?
Here's the point: everybody's different, Peter. I don't buy into this whole thing of being normal. There's no such thing as normal. When you really look at someone's life and you look into their life, everyone has a story.
Yeah.
Everyone has something that is going on that is very unique to them. So that, with regards to our children, it's I think they feel very fortunate the life they have, and they're really good people. I'm really proud of them.
Of course, the Cruise children are Australian citizens and spend much of their time here with their mother, Nicole Kidman. But it was when our conversation turned to Nicole that the cool man of Hollywood turned icy.
Now, Nicole, when you were married, it was like you were an adopted part of Australia. Do you still have a connection to Australia?
Well, my children are Australian. Absolutely. I have a lot of friends in Australia. I love Australia.
Was Nicole the love of your life?
What do you mean, Peter?
You were married for 10 years.
Listen, we raised children. How do you answer that question? She's someone that I plan on getting married again.
You do?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And having kids?
Absolutely.
But Nicole was a major part of your life and a love of your life at the time.
I love Nick very much. There's no question.
Would you like Nicole to remarry?
Yes. I want Nicole to be happy. That's what I want.
And do you have a relationship where you talk, it's a parenting relationship, and talk professionally about each other's
listen, here's the thing, Peter.
Yeah.
You're stepping over a line now. You're stepping over a line. You know you are.
I suppose they're questions
Peter,
that people want to know.
Peter, you want to know. Take responsibility for what you want to know. Don't say what other people. This is a conversation that I'm having with you right now.
You're right.
Okay. So I'm just telling you right now. Okay? Just put your manners back in.
Do you think I was out of line?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I apologise for that sincerely.
Good.
At the start of the clip, Peter asked Tom about his own family and then his kids. It's mostly a positive vibe there. But then the tone changes. Peter asks a really personal question. He asks if Nicole was the love of his life. Now remember, Tom and Nicole were already divorced for about 4 years by then. He clearly didn't want to spend his interview talking about his ex-wife. And this is where you see Tom do two related assertive behaviors to signal to Peter that he's hit a boundary. First, Tom takes a deep breath, pauses, and looks off to the side. So whether he was doing this deliberately or not, the signal of discomfort has to show Peter that he's bumped up against something that Tom doesn't want to talk about. Next, instead of answering the question, Tom asked two questions of his own.
What do you mean, Peter? How do you answer that question?
Questions like this are a great way to communicate boundaries. It flips the conversation and asks the other person to explain themselves and give an account. And I have to agree with Tom's approach here. Peter is pushing into pretty personal territory. Tom is there to promote a movie. He has no obligation to talk about how much he loved his ex-wife or not. I think this is a moment where Tom is at his best, by the way. He's laughing. He still seems slightly lighthearted about it. Now, for you, if anybody ever crosses your boundaries, I 100% recommend that you signal assertively that they have done that. Let them know through your nonverbal cues and question, like, what do you mean by that? Why would you ask that? If they have crossed your boundaries and made you feel uncomfortable, you have no obligation to make sure they feel comfortable. Next, Peter keeps asking, and Tom makes another assertive move. He tries to take back some control of the conversation by saying,
You know, I plan on getting married again.
this statement says, you're talking about my past, but let's focus on my future. It's a subtle way to change the subject just slightly. This is another moment that we can learn from. You don't have to simply react to what the other person says. You have the freedom to move the conversation further away from that boundary, which is what Tom tries to do here by focusing on the future. But clearly, Peter doesn't respect that boundary and asks another question about Nicole. But this time, it's not even a question. He makes a statement.
But Nicole was a major part of your life and a love of your life at the time.
He's trying to put words in Tom's mouth. That's not polite and respectful, even if Peter is using a polite tone of voice here. Nobody likes people putting words in their mouth. It's manipulative. Still, Tom shows some restraint and says very concisely that yes, he loved Nicole in the past tense and that he wants her to be happy. I think that's a pretty good answer. Now, to me, that should be the end of this part of the conversation. But Peter pretends not to notice Tom's signals and asks another question about Nicole. Tom doesn't even let him finish this time.
At each other's.
Listen, here's the thing, Peter.
Yeah.
You're stepping over a line now. You're stepping over a line. You know you are.
You're stepping over a line, and you know you are. Tom Cruise makes piercing, unbroken eye contact, and he tilts his head forward as he says this. These are assertive, nonverbal cues. Tom also says Peter's name several times.
Here's the thing, Peter. Peter.
And this is a very assertive move. Saying his name a lot sounds to me like a deliberate tactic. Tom did the same thing in an interview with Matt Lauer and said his name a bunch of times.
The difference is, this was not against her will, though. This wasn't against her will.
Madam asking a question.
It's like when you're in trouble with your parents and they say your name to get your full attention. He's asserting himself and telling Peter essentially, look, buddy, you're in trouble here. Now, I'm not recommending that you use people's names as a go-to way to come at somebody. But Tom here is using this tactic to wrestle back some control in the conversation. Peter isn't respecting the boundary, and now Tom has to reset things. Peter's position becomes pretty weak here, and he tries to hide and do that thing I pointed out in the Barbara Walters Dolly Parton interview. He tries to say, oh, it's not me. These are the questions that people want answered. But Tom isn't having any of it. He's done.
You want to know. Take responsibility for what you want to know. This is a conversation that I'm having with you right now.
You're right.
Put your manners back in.
The more Peter pushes it, the more Tom stiffens his approach. Peter sort of apologizes briefly in the conversation, but then he keeps pushing it a little bit as they roll forward. From this point forward, though, Tom never gives up control and asserts himself from that point on. Now, unfortunately, Peter in 60 Minutes added voiceovers and tried to frame this whole story as an example of Tom losing control and implying that he had a temper issue. But I've watched this several times now, and I'm 100% on Tom Cruise's side. Peter was not respecting the boundaries that Tom was communicating. And if you look at Tom's words only, he never insults Peter. He never does anything rude. Tom just communicates directly what he sees as impolite and tries his best to move things forward. He says, back off, essentially. He could have, however, softened his nonverbals and tone a little bit. So let's talk about some advice. As mentioned, on the nonverbal communication side, Tom was at his best when he was laughing and smiling about Peter's questions near the beginning. I think he came across as the most reasonable when he still showed a bit of a sense of humor about it all. If I had a time machine, I would have advised him to maintain that humor and lightheartedness even for Peter's follow-up questions, so he came across as a little less intense. Humor works great when combined with assertive communication. A little more humor says, hey, come on, I see what you're doing. In fact, Tom uses more humor again a few questions later when he finally gets Peter to back off.
You want to move on? Peter, come on. Let's go, man.
Humor like that can diffuse the situation and make it really hard for Peter to continue asking pushy questions. Next piece of advice. I also think Tom could have verbally communicated his boundary earlier. When Peter asked even his second question about Nicole, I think Tom should have just said something like, oh, come on, I don't feel comfortable talking about my ex-wife right now. I'm not in the mood, what's your next question? If he maintained a sense of humor and signaled his boundaries earlier, I believe it would have helped him soften the exchange quite a bit, because it really gives Peter, the interviewer, no place to go but on to the next topic.